All right, everybody, it's a cool, wintry, snowy day here at the homestead, so we're going to get busy on making some cinnamon rolls this morning. Today I'm going to be using my KitchenAid mixer to help knead the dough along, so let's get started here. Okay, so in my mixing bowl here, I'm going to be putting in 2 cups of flour, 1/3 cup of granulated sugar, and about 4.5 teaspoons of yeast. So there's my 2 cups of flour. There's my 1/3 of sugar. Now I'm going to get my active dry yeast out. Make sure whenever you open your yeast, if you're not keeping it in the packets, that you put it in the fridge. So this calls for about 4.5 teaspoons of your yeast. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and a half. Go ahead and put my yeast back in the fridge. Alright, so now that those dry ingredients are together, I'm gonna stir them up. Oh, I can't forget my 1 teaspoon of salt as well. Alright, now that all that is together, I'm just gonna stir it up. Okay. Now you're going to want to put in a separate bowl, not your bowl that you have your flour in. You're going to put your water and butter in that, and you're going to want to heat that up. So my other mixing bowl here, I'm going to put 1.5 cups of water. Here's my half. And now you're going to want to put your 6 tablespoons of butter. It's also going to be beneficial if you cut that butter up a little bit so that it heats up a little bit better. Try to cut it up in like tablespoon sizes. There's that. You're going to want to heat it up about 30 to 45 seconds or until warm to the touch. We don't want it to be hot, and the butter probably won't be melted completely. So I'm going to go ahead and put that in for 30 to 45 seconds to start that. Like I said, the butter won't be melted completely, but you just want your water to be warm because that helps activate your yeast. If you make it too hot, it'll actually kill your yeast. If it's too cold, it's not going to activate it the way we want it to. I would say that's good. Now I'm going to take 1 large egg. This is a farm fresh egg from our chickens. That always makes it a little bit better. So I'm going to go ahead and crack it and put it in here. And now you're going to pour your wet ingredients into your dry ingredients. Now I'm going to attach this bowl into my KitchenAid. I'm going to go ahead and lower it down in there. My bowl is good and locked in. Make sure you turn on the side to lock it down. And now I'm going to put it on the 2 setting. Okay, so now we're going to take it out of the mixing bowl. so now you're gonna put some flour on down so it's not sticking to the, so it's not sticking. I still put mine on a cutting board. A lot of people can put it on a straight onto your counters with some flour. That works well too. So I'm just going to do a little more kneading by hand. The mixer did all the hard work for us here though. So I'm still a little bit sticky here. I'm still just working it in. With it still being a little bit sticky, I think I'm going to add just a little bit of flour here to it to help. If it's very sticky to you, I would recommend adding another 1/4 cup of flour. So it's still a little sticky to my fingers, so that's why I added that little bit of flour. So you get a little sticky fingers if I'm needing to add a little bit more flour. Alright, so if you can make it a nice and like a little sticky mass, kind of the way it is right here, this is how you know it's ready. If it's still stringing all over the place, then that's a good sign that you need to add more flour to it. All right, a good sign is when you have it like this to use a clean finger. If you press into the dough and your finger gets stuck, that's a good sign that you need to add more flour. If you poke your finger in and you come back out and you're clean, then that's a good sign that you're ready to go ahead and put this in a bowl and let it rest for a few minutes and see how it rises. All right, so now that we've got this thing good and shaped, I'm gonna let this rest uncovered for 10 minutes and watch how it rises. It doesn't need to quite double in size, but it does need to rise a little bit. All right, guys, so I like to multitask while that is rising up a little bit. Remember, not double in size, but just rising up some. I went ahead and got my 1/2 cup of brown sugar, my 1/4 cup of room temperature butter, and my 1 tablespoon of cinnamon ready for the filling. So we're gonna go ahead and plop out the bread over onto a floured counter surface to go ahead and shape it into and thin it out. All right, guys, so we're gonna go ahead and get our dough here onto a floured surface. We're gonna go ahead and start pushing this out and trying to get it thinned out. The goal is to get it into a 10 by 15 rectangle. Might take a minute to get it all pushed and rolled out thin. As I use my hands, a rolling pin is ideal here. I'm gonna try to get it rolled out into a 10 by 15 size. You want it nice and thin so that it's easier for you to roll nice and tight for the cinnamon rolls. You put the flour down so it doesn't get stuck to you or your hands. Make sure you have a rolling pin too, that you are putting flour on that rolling pin as well, so that it doesn't get stuck. Just like I put flour on my hands. Try to get it as even as possible too. Make sure it's flour under it still. Okay, so another alternative that I found, if you don't have a rolling pin, a little mason jar actually works out great to get it flattened out and thinned out. We're always thinking of ways to show you guys something. Because not everybody may have a rolling pin who wants to try cinnamon rolls. So your hands work out great, but don't be afraid to get creative and intuitive here. All right. I think I've got it pretty good rolled out. Remember, you don't want your dough to rip, but you do want it to be nice and thin. Okay, so now I'm going to spread on some room temperature butter into a thin and even layer, leaving about a 1/2 inch border around the outside of the dough. This is just going to help in cutting even pieces if I leave a little bit of a border. But I'm going to try to spread it on pretty evenly. The reason we want room temperature butter is because if it's too hot, it's going to melt into your dough. If it's too cool whenever you go to spread it, it is going to tear your dough that you've just spread out. So here, this butter is really supposed to just be helping us get our brown sugar and cinnamon to stick on here. I'm using like a butter knife to help spread this on. I think it's gonna work the best. Normally I would use maybe a brush because that would help not tear my dough that I have. However, the brush is a little hard to get the butter to spread whenever it's at a room temperature and not so much melted on. So that's why we use butter. Get a little closer to some edges here. I am by no stretch also an expert. This is actually my very few times of making dough and bread and whatnot. That's one thing Austin and I always say, we never claim to be an expert. Once again, making sure that we're covering it evenly is one of the most important parts, because you want your mixture to fit evenly, but you also don't want a big clump of butter in one area whenever you go to bake it. Almost done here. I'm trying to see where we could use a little bit more. Okay, so last of butter. Then we're going to move into the 1/2 cup of brown sugar. We're just going to sprinkle it on, try to fit it on evenly as well. This is just sprinkle this on evenly with your hand, going over where you have the butter. It's easy for brown sugar to clump up, so make sure to spread out if you have any clumps too. We like to use our cinnamon rolls, yes, at breakfast, but also as like a sweet treat. So this is probably what we'll eat for dessert tonight. So I think we've got brown sugar covered in pretty evenly. Try to stay on that where you have your butter. Now we're going to go through with our 1 tablespoon of cinnamon. And we're going to do the same thing, just sprinkle it kind of evenly throughout. Some cinnamon recipes, they have you mix the filling all together and then spread it on. I can see where that actually might be a little bit helpful, just to make sure you get the whole mixture on there together evenly. So, alright, so now that we have all of the brown sugar and cinnamon on there, we're going to want to roll this up into what seems and looks like a log. We're going to give it a gentle squeeze then to kind of put it all together. Okay. So I'm gonna roll it from this side in, trying to get it as even as possible here. Not as this might be the hardest part, because you want to roll and get it nice and tight. But you don't want that to do it, you want it to roll nice and evenly. Because you're doing this, simple. A little squeeze out of here to get it all compacted in there. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and grease 2 pans here. Well, I'm going to grease one. I have a feeling that we're going to have too many rolls, but I'm going to use this butter here, and I'm just going to grease the bottom and the sides. And we'll just do that one for now. Okay. So this is what it looks like right now, everybody. So now let's get to cutting it. Okay, so we're going to use a set of dental floss here to cut these. I'm going to go ahead and cut off the end here. So you're going to put the floss underneath. Gonna put it underneath. And it'll cut it like so. Alright, so there's an end. Let's go ahead now and we're gonna try to cut the log in half. So I'm gonna go ahead and flip it over and cut off the other end to try to get even sizes. That was a lot of dough from the sides. So now let's go ahead and try to cut this in half. Oop. All right. And I'm gonna go ahead and set it in my pan. Remember, it is okay for them to be touching. It's better to use dental floss than a knife because a knife may push down and change the shape of your cinnamon rolls. I swear the dental floss is cutting it from the inside out. Where's the knife cutting it from? The outside in. It's a nice clean cut. I'm trying to get them all to stick in here, to fit in the hand. Might be a little bit of tight fit on some of them. That's okay. So remember, it's okay for them to be touching in. Okay. Let's just cut the size one here. Okay. Let's go ahead and grease another pan here. I think we're going to put a little more. It's okay too if you've got to, make sure you roll them, get them rolled up nice and tight. Sometimes they start to come apart and okay, so all of our cinnamon rolls are in their pans. So now we are going to place in a warm spot and we're going to cover them with a dish towel. Since it's so cold and you don't want to have a draft, what I like to do is I'm going to turn my oven light on and then I'm going to cover them and put them inside of my oven with the oven light on. You're going to want to let them rise for 1 hour. You could also preheat your oven to the lowest setting, and then when you go to put them in there, turn the oven off so then it's just a warm place. But in 1 hour, we're going to check on them again. All right, so our cinnamon rolls have now have been rising for an hour, so now we're going to bake them at 350 degrees for about 25 to 30 minutes or until the tops are a golden brown. While they bake, I'm going to start getting ready some of the things to make the homemade icing, and then I'll wait until I pull them out of the oven, and then we'll put them in there we'll start making the icing when I pull them out of the oven, so that gives it time to cool down while the icing is made. Alright guys, so here we have them straight out of the oven. It was about 25 minutes exactly at 350 in my oven. So now while these guys cool down, let's go over and make our icing so they have time to cool down before we put the icing on top. Alright guys, so now we're going to go ahead and get the icing all mixed up together here. Make sure, once again, you're using room temperature things. So I'm going to use 1 cup of powdered sugar, 4 ounces of cream cheese, and 2 teaspoons of vanilla extract, and a 1/4 cup of room temperature butter. Alright, so first we're going to want to put our cream cheese and our butter in a bowl, and we're going to use a fork to smash them up together to make sure they're both softened to room temperature. If you don't do that, your icing may turn out lumpy. Alright. And I'm going to use a fork to mash them up together. Alright, now we're going to add the cup of powdered sugar. And we're going to add 2 teaspoons of vanilla extract. Alright, I'm gonna mashing this together. On a fork. You can tell it's starting to get more of an icing texture on it. I'm going to give it a stir. I think that this is ready to go on the cinnamon rolls. You don't want to put the icing on when the cinnamon rolls are too hot, because then sometimes it'll just like melt away your icing and it'll just run off of them. As to where when you just do it when it's nice and warm, it does melt over them just a little bit, but it doesn't make it as runny off of them as what it would if they were really hot. So let's put some icing on these cinnamon rolls. I'm just using the same fork that I had on, that I made the icing with. I'm just gonna plop some on there. I kind of like to just put some on there and then see how much icing I have after I make sure that each cinnamon roll gets some. The good thing about making your own cinnamon rolls too is normally store-bought cinnamon rolls only come with a tiny little packet of icing. At least when you home make your cinnamon rolls, you can add and make as much icing as you need to or want to. You can see that the icing's starting to get a little thinner because the cinnamon rolls are nice and warm, so it's melting it down a little bit more.